Good evening and welcome to the Good Sources show, Not Q&A. We are a show that is endeavouring to counter the left-stream narratives that are in your head all the time. And so we don't feel the need to put them on the set tonight. We're going to be giving you a different source of views. And tonight we have a great lineup. Now, Daniel Andrews recently passed some legislation in Victoria which saw making illegal a ban on talk therapy. It's now illegal if you're a same-sex attracted adult to go to a person, a therapist or a spiritual advisor, and ask them to give you advice and counselling on how you might deal with the feelings that you don't want. That's illegal. Daniel Andrews says, no, that's not okay. You can obviously go and talk to somebody if you don't want to be straight any longer, but you can't go and talk. It's one direction only. Now, unfortunately, there are a lot of people who experience an end to those feelings of attraction, quite often by dealing with underlying issues. We've had guests on the show before who've done that very successfully, very effectively. And they didn't need electrotherapy or anything cruel or unusual to do it. It was just dealing with psychotherapy issues. Now, somebody who's probably had more than one therapist and has managed to resolve some of those feelings of same-sex attraction, now declared himself an ex-gay, is Milo Yiannopoulos. And joining me tonight on the panel to discuss Milo's conversion therapy is Alexandra Marshall. Ellie, welcome to the Good Sources Not Q&A, again for many times, regular panelist. Now, you've actually written about this in The Spectator. What do you think is going through Victorians' mind or even Milo's mind right now with the different issues that arise from Milo telling the world he's no longer gay?
Well, I don't think anybody could have predicted the headlines that came out a couple of weeks ago when Milo declared himself chaste, ex-gay and Catholic. But Milo is a fascinating story. In particular, he is a figure of outrage for the left because obviously the left engage in social justice politics where everybody is a combination of their identity. And Milo has crossed their boundaries many times because he occupies a victimhood narrative as a previously gay man. And now he has gone and done the reverse where he's changed his sexuality, which of course is a threat to the left. You're allowed to convert out of being straight, but you're not allowed to convert out of being gay because they see that as a kind of invalidation of their sexual preference, which is of course rubbish. That's their own invention. So what do the left do with Milo? How do they deal with the fact that someone who they hate is now a victim of what they would call conversion therapy? And of course, the left's answer is, well, no matter how much of a victim you actually are, they're going to hate you regardless because, you know, they love to hate Milo. As for Victoria, everything is illegal in Victoria. So I don't think Victorians are going to notice any difference because they've got so many rules. Who would even know what you can and can't do in Victoria anymore? I mean, it's illegal to leave your house half the time.
It is. It's very brave of Milo. I guess he's never been afraid of making himself a target of the woke-tivists. And he actually says that he's now going to start his own conversion therapy business facility. I'm not sure exactly what noun to put on it, but he's going to start up a practice offering helping same-sex attracted people deal with those feelings, unwanted feelings in California. And he says it's the best fundraising source. People are just flocking to give him checks because they feel like they have become victims of what he describes as the gay establishment.
Well, let's put it this way. Milo is consistent in one respect. He has always asked difficult questions of social politics. And he might be asking different difficult questions depending on which year it is. but there's still questions that the woke particularly don't know how to answer because they base their politics basically on a fallacy. And Milo has a point, the left keep telling us that sexuality is something that can be changed, and there's all these young groups organized to help kids recognize their sexuality and change being straight to gay. And all Milo has done is said, well, sometimes, there could be a mistake and you might want to go back to being straight, and what's the harm in having a therapist help people go down that journey? And of course, he has been the victim of the most vile abuse online, which is threatening and what would almost certainly get you kicked off if you said it to someone who was actually gay still. And it just shows you how sexuality is being used as a weapon in social politics. And, whether or not Milo is serious or permanent, it doesn't matter. At least he's asking the questions and showing up the duplicity of this social politics that we find ourselves in.
Absolutely. I would also like to welcome to the show tonight and to the panel, Jamie Spry. Jamie has a significant following on Twitter because of the common sense that he constantly streams, lots of science and arguments about the climate change myth. Jamie, welcome to Not Q&A.
Good to be here. Yeah, thank you.
Now, you've been listening to our conversation now. What are your thoughts? I actually have no idea what you think, so this is an open question. Launch into put on your gumboots. Milo Yiannopoulos, ex-gay, now practicing conversion therapy, now offering conversion therapy.
Well, I think Ellie put on a good word, duplicity. I think that sums it up. And I think what Milo represents is a microcosm of all of the causes of the left, whereby they're more a function of power as opposed to what they actually try to define and try to make better in society. Like what's Milo? He ticked every single box of the political correct woke society. He was gay, married to a black man, an immigrant when he actually lived in America. Yet when he upholds a conservative viewpoint, which is his free right and his free speech, he is ridiculed by the left and attacked for that, which opens it shows that often a lot of the left's arguments are basically, in my opinion, derived around power rather than what they actually attempt to serve to produce. They're sensitive issues: climate change, racism, sexuality. They're very emotional, emotive issues that they are using, and often, I guess, in the case of Milo, we can see that they're not really geared around a unity for everyone to have the same options to being gay. I mean, Milo's pilloried as a toxic version of for people on the gay side. It's wrong. I mean, he just has a different point of opinion that the left doesn't like. So yeah.
Now, also joining us tonight is Professor Augusto Zimmermann from Perth in Western Australia. Milo, I just called you Milo. It ends with O, but you have many more letters to your name, and probably academic ones as well. Professor Augusto Zimmermann. Now, in Alexandra Marshall's article on Spectator, and I'll try not to call you Milo again, we had... can you just unmute yourself as well? I'm about to ask you a question. We were going to hear every word you say. And if you can do a Milo impression, that will be even better. A Brazilian Milo accent. It would be great. In the article, she highlights a couple of things that some of the woke left have been saying about him. Quote, "In a new grift, fascist MAGA lunatic Milo Yiannopoulos says he's an ex-gay, which... that's not how it works, since it's not a choice. I would know because I'm gay. It's yet another way for this piece of poo to get loathsome, hateful creatures to give him money." And that was said by Ricky Davila. And Nick Walden said, quote, "I'm a proud gay man. Milo declaring that he's an ex-gay is BS and dangerous to hashtag LGBTQ youth whose families believe that homosexuality can be removed, denied or excised. We exist." end quote. So what we see is that disagreeing on the substance of a debate isn't actually possible. Augusto, is this just more example of the left's capacity to engage with the topic?
Well, I think that shows you the capacity of the left to not engage in an issue, because that's when we stop the discussion and start to think about having perhaps a street fight. This whole thing about accusing others and calling people's names, that is when you lose the capacity to reason. And the left has demonstrated over the years that perhaps for lack of better arguments, they want to cancel people and silence the debate. If they were really confident about what they have to say, they would be able to win these discussions using powerful arguments. If there is a lack of power arguments, then we can understand why they have to appeal to other methods. And you see in the West the proliferation of laws that are undermining freedom of speech. And I guess if Milo decided to open his clinic in some parts of this country here in Australia, he would probably even be arrested as a result. So it's really regrettable when we are having the silencing of different opinions, because democracy requires the free exchange of ideas. That's not what they seem to want at all.
Yep. We see in the New York Post that Milo's talking about opening a conversion therapy facility. I'm not sure that that's the best word for it. And I'm not even sure that, I don't know how he's going to do this. I hope he's got nothing to do with it.
Sex therapist. Why doesn't he do that?
Call himself a sex. I actually hope he has nothing to do with it at all. I can't think of anybody worse to provide professional therapy than Milo Yiannopoulos. And professional therapy is a great thing for people to get from a professional. And you know, yeah, again, there's a recent episode of Not Q&A where we had someone who was former homosexual, ex-gay, if that's a terrible label or not. And again, it's a common experience for people who say they are no longer gay to face the worst kind of persecution from the gay establishment than what they say they receive from the majority of the West. But yeah, I hope he's just arm's length away from it all.
Yeah, I think Milo, in what he's doing, is clever at pulling the same leftist narrative back on itself to show that, as we heard, that we need. There's two sides of every coin, and that we need to have free speech. So he adds that little naughty taste to it. But if you look back, I mean, the American left wanted us only 3 weeks ago to have conversion therapy against whiteness, and that was publicized on CNN, NBC. I mean, it's a lot less controversial what he's doing than trying to convert whiteness out of us all. I mean, but yeah. So I guess he's trying to sort of play their own game. Yeah.
You make a good point, and yeah, two good points really there. The whiteness kind of nonsense is certainly toxic and damaging, as if you should now. I don't think there's
racist.
I don't think there's any search for the white gene anymore. I think that's been found.
What Milo has done is he's actually shown that this Marxist obsession with identity politics groups and collectivist groups is that you can join and you get welcomed into open arms a collectivist group, but you can't leave them, because if you leave a collectivist group, you are risking the entire notion of collectivism itself, and that's why they hound Milo for leaving the gay whole genre, even though they hated him being there. He's still not allowed to leave it.
Yeah, and again, it shows that the whole gay mantra is corrupt, because can't Milo be a gay man if he has a different opinion? So it's a source of power rather than an actual cause in my eyes. Yeah,
absolutely.
So there is another point that I would like to make, is that it is this need for conformity that the left is trying to impose on us. that tells me that they are not people who are really keen on promoting real tolerance and diversity. Because, in many ways, Milo is a very colorful character, and he makes things quite entertaining, in my opinion. So when you have people like him suffering this sort of persecution, it tells me that the left wants to impose conformity and uniformity. And if we dare to disagree from them in one single aspect of their totalitarian agenda, they will certainly use any means that are available to them to persecute you and to bring you into their conformity. I have to say that Milo is a man who is evolving, and he is actually trying to progress in his ideas, and that means that he is an intelligent man who is capable of developing independent thinking. We should applaud him for what he does, because he makes our lives even more colorful and exciting as a result.
Yeah, fair point. He definitely does bring a lot of character to every discussion and every debate, and I definitely don't want to operate the way he does. But I have to admit, for comedic value, like the old court jester mocking the power on the throne, he's very good at pointing out some of the silliness in the status quo and the establishment. So
come on, Dave, we'll get you a glitter Trump hat if you like. You can have one of those.
I would wear it if you got me one too. I would wear that. That would be just hilarious.
I think just on that, he is a particular threat to the left because he's so articulate and clear in what he says. So, and if that's a criminal offence, well, there you go. Sums it up, doesn't it?
I'm curious with Milo. He wrote a brilliant article today in Spectator, and he's very funny and a very talented writer. And I'm sure that's why they hate him, because he can run circles around the left journalists. It's just it's one of his talents.
Very influential human being. Very influential. Yeah. Very clever.
Yeah. Well, today on The Good Source, we reported an opinion piece from George Christensen, who is the chair of a parliamentary committee, which is the Joint Standing Committee on Trade and Investment Growth. Now, if your eyes are drying and you're looking for some paint to watch dry, stay tuned, because it's actually very interesting. They started this investigation right at the beginning of the year, or beginning of last year, before the effects of COVID on the economy came to be widely known. And they tabled a report which is an inquiry into diversifying Australia's trade and investment profile. Now, what they quickly discovered is that Australia, and this isn't new news to anybody, but parliamentary committee has made it official, is that Australia has been overexposed to the Chinese economy. And when we can't get the imports and things that we need from China, sometimes there's very critical things to our health service that failed. Now, what they actually said is that for Australian businesses to go in the direction of diversifying the market, it's been attractive up till now to do business with to do business with China, because their market is something that we can sell to on an enormous scale and buy from at a cheap price. However, China's been increasingly aggressive, and the political scene is now. I was listening to Senator Jim Molan this week, and he was talking about the possibility that we could be having war within the decade, if not much sooner, because of it's just a possibility. It's not inevitable, but China is definitely preparing for those things. And out of the last 16 times that an economy has tried to take over a primary place, like China trying to take over America, it's 12 times ended very, very badly, ended in war. So the question is, how much diversifying should we be doing, given that one of our biggest military threats in the world right now is China? And Jamie, talk to us about what China is actually doing with regards to environmental policy, while we're all worried about turning the world's temperature down by 1/10 of a degree?
Well, I guess if you take the environmental policy from, it depends where you take it from. If you want to know where it comes from in their commitment to, say, the Paris Accord, they had a commitment as a developed nation to have unlimited CO2 emissions until 2030. Now I think that's been ratcheted out to 2060, which I'm not sure if anyone's unable to see that I guess China is pretty much the world's dominant power. They have the strongest navy in the world right now. They've just overtaken America. So I'm not sure that they need such a, and I actually can't understand why they need such credits going through to 2060 if we're all in this together, as they say. Right now, China's putting online 250 gigawatts of coal-fired power. If you want a comparison, Australia has 35 gigawatts available. In our fleet, there's 25 operational coal-fired power stations in Australia. We've got 25, and we are pilloried as the
average coal station is how many gigawatts?
1 or 2. So yeah,
and they're adding 250,
and that's just domestically. So internationally, it quadruples because they're outfitting Africa, India, Vietnam, Indonesia. Yeah. So I mean, you need to put this stuff in context. I mean, it's all very well to say that Western country like Australia, we need to be a leader, but at what sacrifice? Like, all we're doing is sending jobs back to China. Using their windmills and solar panels to make us less competitive and poor. I mean, I don't know. Is that whole thing about socialism makes everyone equally poor? Is that what we really want? I'm not sure.
I actually want to get back to China in just a minute, but Jamie, if you and the panel just excuse me for a second, I'm actually interested, I guess, in engaging everybody's positions on climate change. I guess I'm at what cost kind of sums me up, Jamie. But Jamie, do you believe there is any climate change which is caused significantly by humans? I mean, I assume
absolutely not. I mean, if you look at the IPCC's AR5 report, which was done in 2015, the latest credible one, I guess everyone looks at climate change in the serious sense as extreme weather. Okay, cyclones, tornadoes, floods, drought, all that. The AR5 report said that there is no worsening extreme weather. It's actually getting less. So that is something that's overlooked by the mainstream media. And I mean, it's easy. You can look up AR5 now and look up the extreme weather predictions. There are no catastrophic forecasts. And in terms of, say, climate crisis, climate emergency, which is bandied around in the media, there isn't one scientific paper, and they'll refuse to do it. And to their credit, there's not one scientific paper who says the climate crisis is real. There's no thing. So do I believe that climate change is an existential threat and is happening badly? No, that's why it's not at all. If you look at the data. So is it happening on the media? Absolutely. So if you look at the media, the world's literally going to die in 10 years. But if you look at the data, it's not.
Interesting. Ellie, what about you? What's your position on the various facets of the climate change debate?
So the climate, as anybody with even a cursory knowledge of geology understands, is an ever-changing thing. It is not a climate control thermostat set to humanity. It is a subject of extremely long periods of time and change. And so what we're seeing right now is part of a general warming that started at the end of the last interglacial period, and we're basically stabilizing off the end of a warming period from a nasty icy patch that we went through. There is nothing to suggest that our climate is in any way edging towards catastrophic. We're not supposed to have as much ice as we have right now, as we can tell from the movement of old glaciers. And I mean, people have to remember that our continents are drifting around, crashing into each other. We get hit by stuff from outer space every other week. We are a consequence of violent cataclysmic activity. That's how Earth functions. And so to pretend that humanity is causing some kind of catastrophic climate change is simply not the case. And more importantly, if you do believe that's the case, if you think that carbon is going to destroy the planet in the next 10 years, then you should be the top advocate for nuclear energy, which is the lowest carbon output of any energy in the world, regardless of how expensive you think it is. If money is no object and renewables are not cheap, they are a multi-trillion-dollar industry, then you should be building nuclear power plants, because radioactive activity will not end the planet, will not cause catastrophic climate change. But of course, what we see is an entire industry revolving around the most wasteful, the most mining intense, and overall the least energy per carbon unit expended industry in the world.
Yeah, I think Ellie hits on a good point there. If I can just jump in about nuclear, if they were serious, the green eco zealots about saving the climate, why aren't they jumping in on completely CO2 free nuclear? And it goes back to what exactly is the argument for climate change. In my eyes, it's an argument about energy, and it goes back to the whole population thing, the fear of population. But if it is that, which it came out of the 1970s, and Paul Ehrlich out of Stanford University, if it is that, be honest with us. Tell us that we're worried about overpopulation. Don't tell us that we need to deindustrialize ourselves to save ourselves, because all it'll do is make us make hell on earth. So
Augusto, do you want to chip in on this, or should we move on to the next part of this conversation?
Well, this is not my field, but it's quite clear that but I can't resist to manifest my opinion.
Manifest away.
I have to do so. This is another agenda that's being used in order to increase the power and control of government over our fellow citizens in general. And that is very easy to understand. The word environment actually means surrounding. It's another word that you can use for or replacing the word environment. And surroundings is basically everything. So if I were a communist, I would have, and if I really wanted to implement a totalitarian agenda of controlling every single aspect of a person's life, I would certainly embrace the environmentalist agenda, because that's when you can actually tell people everything they have to do, and everything that's not told them to do, then they are forbidden. So that's when we have the possibility that governments can of extending their power and control over every single aspect of our lives. It's a very dangerous agenda, the environmentalist one. Talking about the weather, by the way, and climate, we know that some scientists have told us that we have gone through periods in our time that the temperature was considerably lower than it is now and considerably higher than it's now. In England, for instance, in the medieval ages, they used to actually produce even wine, and the quality of the wine in London, it seemed to be actually quite good. Greenland is not called white land for a reason. Is that because of climate change, the land is no longer so green, and it would be then another name if it were Greenland discovered by the Danes now. So it's quite clear that the climate changes, and it has nothing to do with human activity.
May I add one quick point, Dave, which is in this whole discussion of climate change, what we used to worry about was pollution. And in the building of massive amounts of renewables, we have created a pollution crisis, particularly in Asia. And I'm sure we'll get to an article I wrote about what China's up to in Tibet in particular. But in mining all these items for their renewables activities, they then sell to the virtuous West. They have been poisoning their rivers, destroying all the natural environment of these previously pristine locations, all in the name of carbon neutrality and green energy, which is anything but. It is producing the most toxic landscape we have ever seen.
Well, in the article on The Good Source today, it finishes, the committee has made recommendations aimed at protecting Australia's national interest and national security, particularly in sensitive and critical sectors. Notably, there are recommendations in this report that go to serious concerns regarding state-owned enterprises and state-linked enterprises, funding our universities and owning or leasing our strategic infrastructure, including the Port of Darwin. Given the ongoing tensions with communist China, it is an unacceptable security risk to have Chinese state-owned and state-linked enterprises involved in our universities and strategic infrastructure. It's a question of trust. Can we trust the Chinese Communist Party with our strategic infrastructure? Can we trust the Chinese Communist Party with our education institutions? And there aren't many right-thinking people in Australia or China who would say yes. These now need to be urgently considered and necessary changes made to secure our nation's future. Let's have a look at your article, Ellie, in The Spectator. That'll be the tab before that one. And in it, you're talking about how China is manipulating their ownership of assets and strategic infrastructure, including the waterways, to wield political and military threats in their continent.
Okay, so essentially it's called Blood in the Water, and it's part of a much larger portfolio of activities that China is engaging in under the guise of energy and advancing third world nations. And what they're really doing is securing their own military assets and creating vast networks of roads and ports and infrastructure, which is heavily militarized and in strategic positions around the world. But in this particular article, my concern is that the West has all these paper treaties and agreements, which on paper says that if conflict were to break out in the Pacific, we could rely on these partners in Asia to come to our assistance, particularly India. But what China has done is started to create these monstrous dams, particularly in Tibet, which control 10 of Asia's largest rivers, particularly things like the Ganges and the Yellow River and the Mekong. And they are playing with cutting off the water supply and diverting the water supply to their Asian neighbors if their neighbors do things like don't vote the right way on one of their requirements or refuse to support them at a certain function. And so when the West thinks that, oh, well, our Asian partners will come to our assistance, that's not the case if China has the ability to cut off their water supply, which is the fundamental resource of these countries. And we've already seen this happening. So the real key and the one that shows what China's up to is Pakistan is the only nation in the Asian region that has a special arrangement with China regarding the dam systems, where China has agreed not to play water politics with Pakistan, where they've also brought their big pipelines in. That's because Pakistan is essential to getting oil out of Iran and up into their northern province of China, which is also where all the Islamic terrorism head down and all the ISIS camps are and everything. That's the same province, and that's where a lot of the activity is happening. Now, I mean, not that you could trust China to hold that agreement up, but you can see how political it is and how militarized their water politics really are. So that's the premise of the article.
The militarization of environmental policy and asset acquisition is actually brilliantly played. They're playing 4D chess with the whole world. China is really positioning themselves to have an effective Cold War with the whole world.
Yeah, well, China has claimed environmental, they reclassified areas of Tibet as environmental areas, and then used that new classification to remove the Tibetans who were there in order for them to go ahead and build their big lithium mines, which were being protested by the Tibetans who were living there. So that's how they go to the UN and say, look how great we are with our environmental, 5 stars, while they're quite literally depopulating that country of its residents.
I think it's instructive, Ellie, what you're saying there. And it's virtual atrocity, the power they have to implement and threaten people's water supplies. But it only happens because they're allowed to. Like the mainstream media allow them, which flows onto the UN and the corporate interests that they allow them to. So that's China's only doing what it needs to do to lift its people out of poverty and to and what they're allowed to do. What they're doing, it's not right. It's imbalance, but they're allowed to do it. The media give them a pass because the corporate interests run the media, I guess. That's how it happens, yeah.
Well, it's not just the corporate interests. A lot of the big mega projects as part of the Belt and Road are in partnership with Western companies like BHP, who are helping China to build their Belt and Road Initiative. So there's a lot of money tied up. And don't forget that China paid for all the African states to switch their vote to stop objecting to China's thing. So this started more than 15 years ago, and now we're seeing the repercussions of nobody paying attention to what China was doing in the third world.
Outside of Trump, and Trump's gone now, which is perfect for them. And now they've got Hunter to rely on, so that no one's going to question their authority. So, yeah.
Well, there was a book by Fred Watts, an Australian man, a medical doctor who became a hero in America fighting the forces of communism and basically telling the American people about the communist threat. He wrote a book called "We Can Trust the Communists to Be Communists." So when you talk about China, we can't trust the Chinese government to be Chinese government. We shouldn't expect them to be behaving in a different fashion. What I think it's very important is to understand that the worst enemy of this country is actually the enemy within. I'm talking about the politicians who have sold out their souls and are basically trying to compromise their values and compromise even national integrity, or the integrity of this nation. National security is an important issue. We have even a foreign affairs minister who is now on leave because of what happened in her office. And imagine this person, this lady, being in a situation that it's a war against another country. It's impossible to have people like her to be serving us as a foreign affairs minister if she feels so distressed about what might happen in her own office. Another thing is that the armed forces, the army, the Australian army, is becoming a laughing stock as a result of these affirmative action policies that Linda Reynolds and others are implementing. I remember, just to give you an example, that she proposed that AFL teams should be mixed because it's not proper to have only men playing football in AFL. So that tells me how idiotic the person is.
In Augusto.
It would be fun, at least, you know. It would be of course, the game would be totally destroyed. Equality. Exactly. But look, we need to have better quality politicians who have a real concern for the country. The main threat to this country is not China. It's the stupid politicians that we have here who are unable to protect this country and seek the best interests of the people.
And the mainstream media who facilitate.
Exactly.
Can I add to that female point? As the woman on this panel, I'm going to pull my gender card for 2 seconds. This really infuriates me. This really infuriates me because there are plenty of women who are scary and completely capable of running a defense ministry. But we are stuck with people who are weak, who can't handle tiny social issues in their own office, let alone be in charge during a situation of war. They are not physically fit to handle the stress of a conflict. What are they doing in office, and why is the Liberal Party, who's supposed to value merit above quotas, doing with this quality of candidate? I don't understand it, and it absolutely makes me furious, because who's going to hire a woman if this is the quality that we are getting out of our ministers?
Do you really think she's,
Can I make a suggestion here?
Under the stress? Sorry, I just want to ask Ellie, Augusto, forgive me. I just want to ask her, do you really think she's collapsing under the stress, or is it more of a PR move to just take her out of the spotlight and off the stage until this all blows over?
It doesn't matter which one it is. If that's what she's doing, then she's not capable of being in charge of that office. Do you think Winston Churchill or Margaret Thatcher would have wandered off to take some leave to deal with these crucial issues in their office, or would they have gone outside, stood in front of the press gallery, and given their opposition absolute hell? We know exactly what they would have done, so it's irrelevant what she was up to. It was not right.
Either way, yeah.
Yeah, I think we've been bled though with this whole thing, and it's how pathetic and inane what you're actually saying is. We've been led down this road to mediocrity by a mainstream media who's more concerned about the flavor of your ice cream, like literally, rather than actual actual things that are going on in our world, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like a soap opera now.
Yep.
Just to put perhaps proving my point here that gender should be an irrelevant consideration. We should not take into account. I'm 100% sure that people should be appointed as a result of their meritocracy. That I think the best should be in the job. So perhaps Scott Morrison would do a good thing if they can finally start to put in competent people in his cabinet. I will say to you that there are two people who I would like to see in his cabinet. One is that fantastic senator in Queensland, Amanda Stoker. Why not to put her as the Attorney General? She would be doing a much better job than the hopeless Christian Porter. And another person that should have an opportunity is Andrew Hastie. Andrew Hastie is a wonderful man. Why Scott Morrison has such a disregard for competent people? I don't know. Perhaps because he doesn't want to be surrounded by people who are much better than him.
It would be good to see Jim Molan as our Minister for Defence and Andrew Hastie assisting under him. That would be, I think, the perfect mix right now.
Mind you, Hastie has the gut to say what has to be said, but I've seen Jim Molan speak. I've seen Jim Molan speak quite a few times now under pressure, both in person and on screen, and he refuses to hang the lantern on or to bell the cat on some of the most crucial problems that the government has made in its military decisions, which he knows are wrong. He knows very well they've made catastrophic errors, and when questioned directly, particularly by Andrew Bolt last week, he would not say that was a mistake. We have to fix that now, and we're going to do something about it, because that would involve criticising the government. And I'm sure people who have difficult political positions are now afraid of their own party.
Has Andrew Hastie criticised those same decisions?
Yes, Andrew Hastie has criticised. So when he was questioned, Andrew Hastie was prepared to criticise. When Molan was questioned, he was not prepared. And we don't have, I mean, I can only really think of two people in the Liberal Party who will go forward, even Stoker won't do it, and criticise the party when required. And that was Hastie, and that was Craig Kelly, who is now an independent, who has been punished for his devotion to conservative politics. I'm riled up because I'm so sick of our incompetent political parties. It's really driving me absolutely nuts, because it's crucial.
I would like to.
We're at the line. We're at the edge. This is it. We don't have another chance.
I'm sure, and I'm sure all four of us think alike that Craig didn't move anywhere. The party moved away from him. So that's what's sad, to be honest, in conservative values in Australia.
And look, I have to put this plug in here for good grassroots effectivism. And that is, if you are sick of the Liberal Party being compromising and not supporting really strong leaders like Andrew Hastie and Craig Kelly, and if you want some of those better characters in the Liberal Party to have more confidence, then you need to join and add your voice to the demands for Conservatives and for right thinking in the Liberal Party. And that's actually a really good note to segue on to the Western Australian election, which is a complete butcher's mess of a party over there. It's not even deserving barely of the term, with only two people left in the lower house after the West Australian election, and they were decimated. And the face of the West Australian Liberal Party was Zach Kirkup, who's gracing the thumbnail for tonight's episode. And he is as progressive and wet as they come. And the party that elected him chose to reflect itself in their choice of leaders. And they were extremely green, extremely left, extremely progressive. And the West Australian population said, why would we bother with you when we've got the real deal? And they voted the Labor and Greens in a landslide. Augusto, as a West Australian, as a former Liberal Party member who's quit in disgust, tell us about your impressions on the ground with the Liberal Party there and what hope there may be for it?
The situation is so bad here that I had to resign because I have an image and a reputation to preserve. I certainly do not want to be associated with this sort of people at all. Just give an impression, an idea of what took place here. There was that candidate in one of the seats here who is a refugee, a child of immigrants, and she fights for human rights. She made a statement that was terrible about a link between COVID and 5G. But the remaining of the article was pretty good, especially when she complains, but the same, about the communist threat and the fact that COVID might be used also as a strategy by the governments to increase their power and control and things like that. Look, I don't want to be saying too much about what she wrote, but it was overall a decent article. What was indecent and immoral was her treatment. They just got rid of her on the phone. They gave this lady a phone call, Andrea Toccage, saying that she would no longer be a candidate for the party. It started to actually clearly be very nasty towards anybody who dare to have a more alternative point of view. The Liberal Party has ceased to be a party that allows people to have freedom of opinion, especially if it is an opinion about having a regard for the rule of law, a regard for fundamental rights. They chose a leader of the opposition who was a cheerleader for this oppressive regime that we have in Western Australia. So the Labour government was controlling the narrative. There was no option apart from having to agree with the narrative provided by the government. Everything the Premier proposes, the leader of the opposition agrees entirely. So it's almost like to have Coke original and Diet Coke. I hate Diet Coke. I prefer them to have the original. Many people did the same here. The option was between Labour and Labour Light. It was a disaster. And then they introduced the policy that would even embarrass the Greens. The person who introduced this policy is a guy called David Haney, who is now accusing the party of having accepted too many conservatives to join the club. So he is so left-wing, he's so radical, that he is not feeling very comfortable with the presence in the party of conservatives. So the party is a disaster. It's so bad that I think it's broken beyond any repair. The best solution for conservatives in Western Australia is to leave the party to the dustbin of history and create an alternative movement.
We can see there on the screen. A blog post article from Advance Australia, the Green Left, and that's a photo of David Honey on the left, which is a sweet name, and Zach Kirkup on the right, and the headline: Green Left WA blame election loss on Christian right. Yes, that was clearly a problem. Far too many conservatives in the WA Liberal Party. And yes, that's exactly what the West Australian public saw, was a very, very, very conservative party. But if we go to the article before that, the ABC News report says a debacle over its green energy policy, the decision to call for a reopening of the borders at the height of the pandemic, and the toxicity of the federal government backing Clive Palmer's High Court challenge have all contributed to a generational wipeout for the WA Liberals.
This is a lie. This is a lie of the.
That's according to the former opposition leader Mike Nairn.
He's terrible. He's terrible. Mike Nairn is an idiot. Look, I'm sorry, I don't have patience for Mike Nairn.
Well, you
Mike
agree
Nairn he's one of the culprits.
You agree with him at least that their green energy policy was a debacle, I assume?
That's the only thing I can agree with. Think about that. The ABC is a left-wing propaganda machine. And this thing about the open borders is the very opposite. Scott Morrison claimed credit for the defeat, the miserable defeat of the Liberal Party. Scott Morrison actually went to the television, and to say that he is very happy with what happened. He can claim credit for that because he instructed the Attorney General to withdraw the support that he would lend to Clive Palmer in that particular case. The Section 19.2 provision was not challenged by the federal government, which allowed the premier here to control the narrative. Scott Morrison is actually claiming credit for this.
Jamie, what do you understand of the WA Liberal energy policy that they took to a campaign, and just how conservative was it?
How much am I concerned about Australian and state politics? Not much. It's predictable and boring, to say the least. How conservative was Kirkup's message to the people? Actually, more far left than the far left has even got. I'm going to quote something from Financial Review paper, who's pretty much not a conservative group, by Brad Thompson, saying Zad Kirkup unveiled one of the greenest energy plans put forward by a major political party anywhere in the country. And this is out of the Australian Energy Council, who is far from conservative in their views on energy. They said critics will argue that the plan lacks detail, may increase costs, it's too aggressive for such a short time frame. I mean, if the Energy Council and the Australian Financial Review are berating him for being too green, we've got a problem, Houston, you know? So, yeah. So it's not conservative at all, to answer your question. And I mean, just to add to that, I mean, he actually went to the one of his views. He wants to shut down all coal-fired power stations by 2025. I mean, This is madness, and it's you can see how I think Western Australia, the mining industry, I mean, they paid probably a lot of the bills, made us a lot free, and give us the chance for people to protest on the streets when they're not working. But the mining industry is having a capitulation, obviously, as you know. So, and that's part to do with this whole environmental thing. And China's taking up the flow, but no one seems to be parading outside of Chinese embassies and saying, "What are you doing?" Where's Greta outside of the Chinese embassy? I don't see her there. She just continues to bash the West because apparently West is colonial, patriarchal, and evil. But I'd say to Greta, go back to school and learn how many people that the communist regimes have killed and how far they existed.
That's the right thing to say.
There is something I need to say also. I don't know if you'll be able to comment on that. Is the fact that this character, Zach character, he conceded defeat 2 weeks before the election. You know,
16
it's
days.
An amazing thing. I have never seen such a thing in my whole life. So he was saying, I'm so bad and so incompetent, and of course, label light, that it's better for you to vote in the original. I don't want to win this election. I concede defeat. I mean, it is bizarre, this whole thing. I think he might be a person working for the Labour Party to destroy the Liberals. I mean, there might be he might be an infiltrator. I have never seen such a display of stupidity in my whole life. I have never seen a candidate that's so bizarre and weak. And they chose this guy to be the leader of the party. Really, there is something intrinsically wrong with the Liberals in Western Australia.
Ellie Melly,
putting policies forward to... No, go. Sorry, go.
Ellie Melly, is there any saving the Liberals in WA? Is it all the Nationals show now? How long is it going to take the Liberals to rebuild the party into something approaching a credible risk of government?
Well, first of all, I called Kirkup the Matt Keane of the West. I have another name for Kirkup that I can't say on this program, or Dave will kick me up, but I'm sure you guys can work out what it is. And the WA election was essentially a pity date of politics. Everybody knew it was going to happen, but we all had to rock up and go through the whole shenanigans, knowing what the answer was going to be. The only question was how badly would he lose and how short would his political career be. I also said that he had the survival instinct of a spear fisherman swimming through the heads of Sydney with big fish cats to him. That actually outlived Kirkup because he was gone before the article was even published. But WA, I don't know if anybody's told the Liberals over there that their entire state economy is not carbon neutral. They are a mining intensive state. They make the money for Australia by digging up the resources we require to build our infrastructure and power the country, and that's just how it is. Everybody needs to dig up stuff out of the ground if they want to have life. Every country on earth, doesn't matter how carbon neutral they want to claim to be, it starts in the ground. And so either the Liberal Party are being, well, lying to the people and saying our carbon neutral is not going to involve any mining, when they know full well they're going to go and open renewables mines, which are far more polluting and destructive to the environment than their current coal mines and uranium mines. So they might think they're going to make a fortune for all their mates in mining without actually saying that they're going to do so, which is misleading the public. Or they simply have no clue how energy works, how the system that keeps their state alive works. I'd love to know what they think they're going to do economically if they were able to get anywhere near a budget without the money coming in from the mining industry, because you can't give a welfare state kind of existence to all their Labor and Green friends who they've cultivated in the universities and through schools if you don't make any money in the first place. And if WA doesn't make any money, then Australia has no use for you guys on the West Coast. We can pretty much just seal that desert up and you guys can stay there, because we have no room for a premier who thinks it's okay and acceptable to stick an ankle bracelet onto a COVID patient as if they were some kind of criminal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think they're very happy to build their own wall and keep themselves in, Ellie.
They don't need a wall. They've got a desert and an ocean, and no one's going over them into sensible politics.
Yeah, very true. Do you think there's any coming back for them?
For WA?
No.
Well, no, actually, I'm going to disagree with you there. We have seen apocalyptic, the greatest, worst nightmare-style apocalypses in politics before, in which Labor has been wiped out so badly. Like, look at the John Howard years. Nobody ever thought we'd see Labor again. And yet the system of government is such that it is cyclic. And no matter how bad things get, there's always been in history conservative politics and left-wing politics. And that will never change, because humans are always like that. The parties may have different names. We may see different coalitions rise, but we will see a change of politics.
You know what, Augusto, I'm going to have to hope you're wrong. And I think if there was ever a good time to flood the Liberal Party with right-thinking people,
look, you are wrong.
Now would be the
time. You guys are wrong. I'm going to explain now.
You can explain it in a sec. Just a sec, Augusto.
All right.
What we need people to do when there's only two incumbents in the Liberal Party, now is the perfect time to flood the party and make sure that the pre-selections at the next state election, 4 years away, get in now, play by the rules, control your own vote, pay for your own membership fee, and make sure that the people who are put up in every electorate in Western Australia at the next election, and the people who fill the office bearers, the president and the chairman of the regions and the branches, now is the time to make sure that the people who are choosing those people are not the same left-wing, progressive, green, wet, mayhem-wrecking
types
who have been in the Liberal Party for so long. We need to double the Liberal Party's numbers over there and dilute them with right-thinking people, and make sure that the pre-selected candidates for the next election are really, really good quality people. But
they'll be,
if the status quo stays as is, then nothing's going to change.
They'll be disendorsed. Listen, there were a couple of good candidates here, but they were totally boycotted by the leadership of the party. Now the party has only 2 members. One of the members is actually now on a witch hunt on Christians and conservatives in the party. He's actually blaming people who are more classical liberals for having caused the defeat. He's the mentor of the environmental policy that has proven to be so disastrous, and he's putting the blame on the conservatives. His name is David Haney, and the leadership of the party now is entirely controlled by these sort of characters. If you are really a conservative, you have very little chance to even have a place in this party. The party has been taken over by these people. I believe that perhaps in a couple of years' time, there will be a chance for the Liberal Party to change and change for the better. But at this moment in time, the Liberal Party has been taken over by the radical left. I can tell you, this David Honey, he's extreme leftist. I used to work with his wife at his wife at Murdoch University. She was my colleague. She was campaigning for all these leftist causes, and she told me that she would never ever vote for her husband or for the Liberal Party because it's not left wing enough. It seems that he's become a little bit like her. So I can tell you one thing: Liberal Party can change, but the people who are now in positions of power, they are not conservative or, as I am, classical liberals.
Well, they're exactly the people that need to be flushed out in the wash up of this election. The Liberal Party needs to have a good look at itself and renovate from the ground floor to the top floor. Just get rid of everybody that's part of the swamp that has led to the Liberal Party devastation. Clearly, you failed. Clearly, you're not qualified or competent to run the place, and clearly, a hard lurch to the left is not a viable strategy for winning the next election.
I think Jamie should run against Matt Keane.
I guess it doesn't bode well for democracy as such. I mean, you've got Dave Tahani in Western Australia, and you've got Photios in New South Wales. So they are pretty much circumventing all of the Conservative votes, really. What they say, who they put in goes. And who's Michael Photios? Who voted him in? So he's got more power than the actual people. And we've seen it in 2018. The quiet Australians put Morrison in based upon the threat of Shorten's extreme climate programs, and I guess negative gearing. But what did we get when we put Morrison in? We got appeasement to the ABC and more green policies. It's not what the electorate wanted.
Very disappointing.
It's bizarre.
Well, if anybody has done their homework
so
on
our votes don't count anymore. They don't count.
And if anybody had done their homework on Morrison and actually had a look at his politics, they would have seen that while he was under Tony Abbott's leadership, he did what he was told. But when you read what his actual politics were, they were closer to Turnbull. In some ways, he was more radical on the left than Turnbull was. And
Absolutely.
So this inability of the party to assess its own leaders and be honest about who they've got sitting in these positions, they are misleading the public. And then when they miraculously managed to win an election because Shorten was just so terrible that even the left were like, we can't do that. You can't have our youths. We're not going to elect Shorten. The Liberals didn't learn their lesson and go, phew, we escaped our own politics. Now let's do what the public asks us to do. They think that if they appease the Canberra press gallery, they will be successful as a government. And every single state government that has done that and gone further left has been destroyed at elections. And I mean, Victorians are starting to realise that their political party, Victoria, which they were sort of the first to really go down that trench of nothingness, they have to reform their party back to old school Liberal, or they will never see government again.
Yep.
Absolutely.
100% correct. Well, guys, I'm actually pretty happy to start wrapping this up. Do you guys want to raise any other topics or bring this home? Communist Committee decision.
Oh, well, we could just say that we're all writing in the public forum, and we know for a fact that we cannot rely on the press to highlight the important issues facing not just conservative politics and liberal politics, but the future security of our nation in regards to political failures that are entrenched in both parties. And so I would invite anybody listening, anybody who actually does write, or if you don't write, just online, to start talking about the issues that our politicians don't want you to talk about and the press won't talk about. Because if we don't start talking, there will never be enough noise to concern politicians with answering the difficult questions.
Yeah, no, correct. And that's a very good point. And of course, that's what we're doing here at The Good Source, is we're giving a platform and giving a voice to a lot of independent contributors. We publish articles, but we also publish lots of videos and podcasts by Australians who are leading the thought on pushing back on the progressive agenda, just trying to get some right thinking into the place without euphemisms and wokeisms, throwing out the baby with the bathwater in everything that was good and established. It's the ultimate pushback against critical theory. The leftists want to attack everything, and the right think that some things might be actually worth holding on to. Augusto?
No, look, what Annie is saying is perfect, because think about what happened after this election. The ABC is asking the opinion of the person who is the main culprit for the problem that the Liberal Party is facing. Who is this sort of person? Is David Haney and Zach. So they are now writing the report for the Liberal Party to say that the election was lost as a result of the Liberal Party being too conservative, when the leader of the party conceded defeat 2 weeks before the election. I have never seen such a stupid thing. You know, it's really a very terrible miscalculation. Then you have David Haney being interviewed by the Financial Review to give his opinion of what happened. Well, I know what happened. He is the problem. And what happened is his stupid environmental policy. I invite David Haney now in this program to join the Greens, but I don't think they would accept him because he's too radical for them.
He's too radical for the Greens. I love you, Augusto. You're worth every dollar. Fantastic.
Well, it's a reality can be comical.
It is. I love your passion, and everybody does. You're always a favorite on the Good Source shows. That's fantastic. Jamie, your thoughts to wrap up the evening?
I think many would look, especially in the media cartel, would look at a segment like what we're doing as fringe. I personally believe that 70% of all society is predominantly conservative based in their thoughts. Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom to do what they will, freedom to make their own money, freedom to spend their own money. They're core conservative principles, and that's basically all we are doing here right now, is espousing conservative principles. And the scientific method going to climate is analysing data, analysing maths. And if we talk about maths, apparently that's racist now. So the left are trying to compound any kind of empirical evidence based on anything. But back to that, I think what we're doing is good. I think many more people than many of us know actually espouse the views we do, but they're afraid to say them. But I think we just have to keep pressing on and pushing on with things like this, and keep writing material and keep pressing our government officials. Yeah, that's it. So thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure, and we'll definitely have to have more of you. I actually I either want to do an interview with you or maybe do a whole not Q&A special in 2 or 3 weeks on climate, and just discuss the politics around it and the science around it. Maybe see if we can find some pro anthropogenic global warming climate change people to sort of be a bit of a foil and see if they can bring their best arguments. If there is, we'd love to have that. If you know anybody who you think can argue well and would be a credible and articulate person on the panel, drop us their details and we'll reach out to them and see if they would be brave enough. Although they might sneer and pretend they're too good.
They're few and far between, really. In the historical climate wars, they refuse to show up to climate debates for obvious reasons. But yeah, but I'll take that on board. Yeah, I'll try and find someone. So
yeah, there's a couple of good shows planned up coming up for the next few weeks. I actually want to finish with a lady this evening, Augusto. So let's get some final thoughts from you for the evening before we go to Alexandra.
Augusto?
Are you there, Augusto?
Oh, look, sorry, I thought Alexandra would be the first, but no. I just want to say that it is really, really a privilege to be engaged in this sort of discussion. We know that the media is censoring the debate. The mainstream media controls the narrative that is provided by the politicians. There is a sort of a very sinister combination of factors now. We have the mainstream media and the political establishment trying to dictate what we have to do, what we have to think. And it's a very important thing what Jenny has mentioned about the idea that we need to have freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom to develop our own approach to life. And that's what we need to do. And that's why these sort of conversations that we have, they are so important. The price of liberty is indeed eternal vigilance. We can only keep it if we are able to fight against the forces of oppression who wants to control and mold us. We need to be able to resist, and we need to be able to speak out our minds with confidence and be not afraid of having the sort of robust debates that we are having right now.
Yep, very good. And Alexandra, thank you as always. You're always a favorite on Not Q&A. Your final thoughts for the evening.
Well, for the last time, Dave, I'm not a lady, I'm a vampire. So get in line with the correct language of identifying me. Thank you very much. No,
At least
I'm
an Apache attack helicopter.
Hey, I was a vampire before. No, I wanted to interview Augusto on my show because the wealth of knowledge, I've already interviewed Jamie and he was absolutely fabulous, but the wealth of political knowledge that is on show here is lost and completely absent from the debates that we see online. No one is having sensible discussions. We are speaking almost entirely in hashtags and half thought out, little bubbles that come out of the press gallery, which, they don't stand up to any scrutiny at all. It's ridiculous that we seem to be living in some kind of world that bears little resemblance to reality. If you told people today that these would be discussing things like maths is racist in 2021, they would have looked at you like you were a complete lunatic. You probably would have ended up in a safe-based padded environment. So
I think, forgive me for interrupting you, Ellie. To your point, we saw a motion in the Senate today banning government using the words like chest feeding. So, wow.
Yes, I have often said that if men start calling women chest feeders, the human race will be endangered pretty quick, smart, because I can't see anybody shagging them if that's the language we're going to start employing. I've had way too much chocolate today. You can tell I'm a bit riled up. But thank you everybody for joining us. It was just a wonderful panel, and I really enjoyed myself today. So thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie.
Actually, Psychedelic has suggested Jonathan Sri might be somebody good to get in. And my guest on Tuesday night was Nathan Campbell's actually hoping to make that introduction for us. So I'll try and have a coffee and make sure Jonathan knows we're not trying to embarrass and humiliate and do a gotcha, but we're actually after a bit of a meaningful debate if one's possible. He's a Greens councillor here in Brisbane City Council, for those people who don't know who Jonathan Sri is, but an actual elected Greens person who might be willing to appear on a right-wing show would be a novelty worth tuning in for. And I would always ask you to keep the comments civil and just keep it logical and set a higher bar. But look, this is the Good Source. We're a website and a platform trying to give independent, right-thinking people more exposure, more voice, bring them to you. Quite often have a really good platform all of their own, such as Jamie and Ellie. And we want to make videos and podcasts to bring their voices. And so thank you very much to the Good Source supporters who put their hand in their pocket for a little bit, $5, $10, $20 a month, and just faithfully keep the money coming in so that we can bring this kind of platform to you, because this is not the ABC, and you will hear right thinking articulated clearly. And we are very interested in having our ideas challenged so that we can make our ideas better. If we're wrong, we'd rather not be. And hopefully you think the same thing. Well, that's it from Not Q&A tonight. And we look forward to seeing you again next week. Make sure you go to goodsource.news, subscribe to our email updates, and find us on all the social media channels. And we will see you again next week. Good night.